Adil, I think you should ask people on the street about their thoughts.
Whistle, give me like 2 minutes. I'm in the building. I'm walking in.
No,
Which building?
we need the shots of you walking through the building. Walking to the building.
Good morning, everyone. We are here at the Nerdiest Show on the Internet, episode 6. And we are lucky to have 3 fantastic people join us.
And Bassam.
And myself, Bassam, Professor Hatim, Professor Adil, and Professor Nadya. And we will not use the word professor anymore. Hatim, Adil, and Nadya, our media experts who will actually address our show today on media. And we have a number of books that we will start with right now. And I will begin by addressing the first volume. Is everybody ready? I know Adil is in a car in Cairo because of traffic. We waited as long as we can, but Cairo traffic beat us. So, assalamu alaikum. Ahlan Adil. Welcome to the show.
Ahlan Miki. Thank you.
Ahlan
It's great to
Nadya.
be here. It's a bumpy show.
Thank you, Habibi. Nadya is an original co-host of the show. You've seen her before, and we have a new addition, Professor Hatim El-Hibri, who will be joining us along with Adil as our media experts. We are starting with Pretty Liar, which is a book by Natalie Khazaal, subtitled Television, Language and Gender in Wartime Lebanon. And this book is out of Syracuse University Press. I will share with you a little bit about the table of contents. Wow, my glasses are not working well anymore.
Do you need to go get new glasses, Bassam?
No, but I think it's my diabetes. It's getting better, which means your vision gets better. No.
Diabetes does not make your vision get better. That's not how that works.
Lack of diabetes gets your vision to improve, and then your glasses don't work.
So your diabetes is getting better, so your glasses...
That's what I just said. I said it's getting better, so my vision is getting better.
I'm glad we're all up to speed.
Yeah. Okay. Adil, if you wondered what this show is about, this is what it's about as well. طيب. Contents, table of contents.
The mix. I'm about to walk out of the car.
Okay, table of contents. We have our first chapter, History of Lebanon, of Lebanese television and the television audience relationship. That's the introduction. We have 2 parts. Part 1 is on the war triangle, and part 2 is on language politics and gender politics on entertainment television. The sub-chapters are Télé Liban, audiences, LBC in part 1, and in part 2, Télé Liban in defense of Fusha, and LBC and language pesoptimism, متشائل, I think. And then, of course, I don't know what I'm saying, of course, chapter 7. Of course, we all know what chapter 7 is.
Of course, it's
And
obviously chapter 7.
it always has this title: War, Modernity, and the Crisis of Patriarchy. The conclusion is the case study, the case for the study of Lebanese broadcast television. The book actually is, again, from Syracuse University, medium-sized length, and I will give it to Hatim to address the other details.
So, we don't have that much about the history of Lebanese TV that is sort of like an insider account or a detailed account of the structure of Lebanese TV, how it's changed, the changing relationship, the changing audiences during things like the Civil War. We have basic accounts, so this seems like it fills a basic hole.
Adil, can you mute your call until you get on?
Yeah.
Yeah, good idea. He's like, yeah.
So, we don't have that many accounts of the history of TV in the Arab world, in Lebanon, ones which go in depth into the changing relationship between TV stations, the industry, and audiences, changing practices of how to produce things like a news journalism show. So this book seems like it goes in much greater depth. It seems like it fills a very important gap in the literature.
And how would you teach it?
I think that I could see certainly some of those introductory chapters, things setting up like the broad stakes for what this history is and how basic accounts of how things have changed over time. and that could be really useful. There's also specific chapters which go into greater depth, specifically about the emergence of LBC, which is a very important dimension or aspect of the emergence of Lebanese TV. And of course, Lebanese TV, I keep saying of course over and over again, Lebanese TV ends up impacting Arab satellite media much more broadly.
So any comments about who praised the book? Well, let me just share some with you. Marwan Kredi provided praise. He's the author of The Naked Blogger of Cairo, Creative Insurgency in the Arab World. Also, Andrea Stanton provided praise, Associate Professor of Islamic Studies at the University of Denver, as well as Christopher Stone, author of Popular Culture and Nationalism in Lebanon, the Fairuz and Rahbani Nation. Chris Stone, by the way, is one of the people who actually wrote for ASJ many years ago on a similar topic, and I just want to do a shout out for Chris Stone. So Hatim, you want to give it to Adil with some words, because he missed while he was trying to navigate Egypt's streets?
So I'll talk a bit about what's on the description on the back cover, the blurb.
And then we'll go into the inside. Yeah. So the basic gist of the book asks the question: how did a new irresistible brand of television emerge from the Lebanese Civil War to conquer the Arab region in the satellite era?
What role did seductive news anchors, cool language teachers, superheroes, and gossip magazines play in negotiating a modern relationship between TV and audiences? How did the government lose its television monopoly to sectarian militias? So these are some of the questions that this book explores. It seems from a study of language and specifically gender as a central component of the negotiation between TV and Lebanese audiences. We have some chapter titles that we can look at as well. The book has, other than an introduction and conclusion, is divided into two parts. The first part is called The War Triangle, From Disengagement to Engagement on the News. And then part 2 is called Language Politics and Gender Politics on Entertainment TV. And so you have 3 chapters in part 1. The first about Télé Liban and the crisis of legitimacy. Chapter 3 is Audiences, Sarcasm, the New Hero of TV and the Components of Modern Legitimacy. Then chapter 4, LBC, an illegitimate militia seeks legitimacy in participating audiences and accommodating media. LBC, of course, one of the first and longest standing non-state partnered TV actors in the Lebanese scene. So then in part 2, we have Télé Liban in defense of Fusha, which I always read as fuchsia when it's written in English. LBC in the language of PES optimism. And then War, Modernity, and the Crisis of Patriarchy. And then the conclusion, the case for the study of Lebanese broadcast TV. You know, a crisis of patriarchy, militias, these are topics which we've seen elsewhere in the literature. Many anthropologists have written about masculinity and Lebanese politics. And so it's a refreshing take to see that be part of the consideration of TV as well.
Awesome.
Haddad, what do you think? If you were to teach chapters from this book, how would you teach them?
I'm so glad you asked that question. I'm actually thinking of all the different ways in which one could employ this volume. It's supremely interesting because it as Marwan Kredi mentions in the back flap, this is an area that's been very rarely discussed analytically. It's almost like that 1.5 decades. There's all this discussion about the rise of contemporary television and broadcasting in the region, but this period, like the 1990s, the rise of satellite television and what that means, and the commercialization and commodification and fetishization, all of that stuff is so interesting, and Lebanon becomes this incredibly compelling hub, almost like another locale, in relation to Cairo, and just before the Gulf comes into the mix, before the massive investment of Gulf funding. So it's really like a black hole, a Pandora's box of like so many interesting things that helps explain the current state of broadcasting in the region. So I think it's a supremely interesting book that can help historicize the contemporary moment in broadcasting. So I can see ways in which it can be useful when we talk about not just popular culture, which I think is the main crux of the book, but really talking about how that dovetails with identity politics, with gender, the fetishization of Lebanese-ness in some parts of the Gulf, and the way in which gender is played off, and how sex is being sold on TV in the region. So all of that is really interesting. I mean, I can imagine at least 2 or 3 courses at the undergraduate and graduate level. Even my son is super excited to hear about this book. And he's only 4, so I mean, there's a lot that could be done with it. Very exciting book, and I hope there are more books of this kind about various locales across the region. We need volumes of this kind that contextualize and historicize and localize television, the advent of television in the region. Today we've got hundreds, if not thousands, of television stations, satellite stations broadcasting across the region. But the LBCs, the Tele Lebans, and the sectarianization of broadcasting too. A lot of that has been missed, and we're looking at the symptom, but not really the germinal conditions that led to this.
Thank you, Adil. Nadya, would you like to add something, given that you're sitting right now in Lebanon?
Well, I'm not, actually.
Okay.
I think she can speak not because of her physical location in Lebanon.
Actually, if you're not in Lebanon, I don't think you can comment. Well, let's say that you were in Lebanon. Where are you in Greece?
If I were in Lebanon, I'd say something very different than what I'm about to say now.
Are you in Greece, Nadya?
Habibi, I'm in Texas.
Oh, you're in Texas. You did come.
Are you at least in Lebanon, Texas? You're not even in Lebanon?
We just talked yesterday.
We had a whole conversation.
I'm losing my mind. Because every time we call you when you're not in the studio, you're in Beirut. I apologize. Okay, خلاص, Texas. تفضلي.
Fine. I mean, I think Adil really made some really excellent points. I would add to that a couple of things from my own perspective as a historian of Lebanon, which is that I love that. I have not yet read this book, but it is definitely one that I would like to read soon. And one of the things that I really would love to see would be how she actually connects the 1990s to the Civil War. There's a tendency to break those apart and to periodize the Civil War on its own, and then to talk about the 1990s and what comes after. Also as sort of a separate period of Lebanese history or regional history. And I think one of the things that this book seems to be doing, based on what I'm hearing, is to sort of show the ways in which the focus on Lebanese government television and state media actually sort of then shifts or bleeds into the more sectarianization of television broadcasts and programs and channels that definitely sort of have crest in the 1990s and then devolve into different kind of satellite TV. So I think that there's a lot to be said for making those kinds of connections. I think there's a lot to be said for the way in which this book connects local TV, state TV with satellite TV. Again, that they're not separate entities, but that they actually were mutually constitutive of one another, I think, to a certain degree, and particularly for looking at satellite TV material. And I think it's interesting to note that the 3 people who blurb the book on the back, one is a professor of media and communications, one is a historian, Andrea Stanton, and one is in comparative literature, Chris Stone. And the fact that these 3 people from 3 very different disciplinary approaches are all commenting on this book indicates, going back to what Adil and Hatim have both said in different ways, to the value that this kind of study has, not just for thinking about media and pop culture, but also for for historicizing or taking a different approach to historicizing Lebanese history, regional history, and then interestingly thinking through perhaps what she talks about in terms of political resistance, feminism, and even histories of technology. So I would look forward to reading this book and hopefully teaching it. So thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much. We are now finished
Now
with our
this is what
first
I'd say
volume.
if I were in Lebanon. I'm just kidding.
But what do you really think?
What was the joke? If you were in
That's what
Lebanon.
I would say if I were in Lebanon.
Okay, yeah. We got it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
We are now finished with our first volume, and we will take a break and we'll come back with TNS.